I want to start with the play that set off all of the chaos. Everything else that we will talk about, there is one play that set off all of it, and it is this steal that Alyssa Thomas made on Naphessa Collier.
The WNBA has been plunged into a state of absolute chaos after a sickening and frightening injury to superstar Naphessa Collier collided head-on with a firestorm of controversy that has now landed squarely and personally at the feet of Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. What began as a heated, almost routine debate over a single late-game play has now detonated into a full-blown league-wide crisis as prominent media voices and a legion of furious fans have now pointed their fingers not just at the referees on the court, but directly at Engelbert herself, accusing her of fostering an environment where this kind of dangerous, reckless physicality is allowed to go completely and utterly unchecked.
The reason this was not called a foul is because they said it's incidental contact after the play on the ball. With that explanation, incidental contact could also be, oh, you're going up for a shot, I go to block you, I block it clean, I don't touch your arm, I don't touch your body or anything, but then I knee you in the stomach after I block it. That's also incidental contact because I jumped off of one leg and then I decided to knee you in the stomach after I blocked your shot.
And instead of calming the raging storm, her reaction reportedly just poured gasoline on the fire, with insiders describing her private outrage and public defensiveness as nothing short of a full-blown tantrum. For the players and coaches on the ground, this was never just about one foul or one game. It was the predictable culmination of a systemic pattern of silence, inaction, and dismissive leadership that many believe has been allowed to fester all season long. And the one stark question that now hangs over the entire league is brutally simple. Can Cathy Engelbert possibly restore her own credibility, or has the damage from her own inaction already gone too far?
And that's the biggest problem that I have with all of this is so many people are fighting the fact that Alyssa Thomas, it didn't seem like she did it on purpose. It doesn't matter. If I hear one more person say, well, she didn't do it on purpose, it doesn't matter. For the most part, you guys, fouls across the board should never be on purpose.
Everything began with one single, decisive, and ultimately catastrophic moment in the high-stakes Minnesota Lynx versus Phoenix Mercury matchup. With the entire game hanging in the balance, Naphessa Collier was driving hard down the court, her eyes locked on the basket. And then came Alyssa Thomas, sliding aggressively across her path in an attempt to rip the ball loose. At first glance, it looked like a perfectly executed defensive play, a clean strip, a quick transition, and an easy layup on the other end of the floor. The Phoenix Mercury celebrated, the scoreboard tilted in their favor, and to the referees on the court, it was just business as usual. But for Naphessa Collier and the entire Minnesota Lynx organization, this was the beginning of an absolute nightmare. Yes, Alyssa Thomas got her hand on the ball first, but the aggressive angle of her body created an unavoidable, high-speed collision course. Collier was sprinting at full speed in one direction, while Thomas barreled across her lane from the side, and their two paths intersected at the worst possible and most devastating moment. Collier's leg became tangled against Thomas's powerful frame, and in a single horrifying instant, her stride was completely broken. She immediately crumpled to the floor, clutching her ankle in agony.
Alyssa Thomas is running across Fee. Fee's going this way, Alyssa Thomas is going this way. Fee is in full motion. You can even see again with this screenshot the angle in which Fee's body is going. She is going full speed in one direction. She is running in one direction, and Alyssa Thomas cuts her off in that regard. The foul happens, in my opinion, after she tips the ball out.
The entire crowd instantly fell silent. What had initially looked like incidental contact at full speed now appeared in the stark, horrifying clarity of slow motion as the kind of dangerous, reckless sequence that could permanently alter a player's entire career. And yet, the officials did not flinch. They ultimately deemed the play completely legal, callously labeling the devastating aftermath as mere incidental contact. According to their official explanation, Alyssa Thomas had made a legitimate play on the ball, and whatever happened afterward was just the natural chaos of basketball. That single ruling left fans and analysts alike completely and utterly stunned, because for anyone who had just watched Naphessa Collier's sickening fall, it did not look like an accident without consequence. It looked like pure unadulterated negligence, and this is precisely where the simmering frustration with the league's officiating finally boiled over. Incidental contact is a rule that is supposed to apply when a defender challenges a shot, reaches for a loose ball, or makes a normal controlled move without intending to collide with the the offensive player, but what happens when that collision is completely unavoidable from the very start? Could Alyssa Thomas have possibly pulled off that steal without cutting directly across Naphessa Collier's full-speed stride? That one simple question completely split the basketball world right down the middle. Some argued that it was a brilliant, heady defensive stop, and others saw it as reckless, dangerous, and a glaring textbook example of the WNBA's infuriating officiating inconsistencies.
This was not ruled a foul, and I am dumbfounded by the amount of people online, even the amount of professionals online who are saying that this is no foul. I don't care if Alyssa Thomas premeditated this foul 6 months ago, or she accidentally did it and called Naphessa Collier after the game and apologized to her and told her that it was an accident. It doesn't matter when it comes to calling a foul. It truly doesn't matter. So I'm also tired of the well, it's not a dirty, but it doesn't matter. Naphessa Collier had nowhere to go. I don't know what the referees thought she could do when she is running full speed. Her leg is in motion and her leg gets caught on Alyssa Thomas's body because Alyssa Thomas is bullying her way through Naphessa Collier's line.
For Naphessa Collier, the timing of this injury could not possibly have been any worse. She is not just a star player for the Minnesota Lynx, she is one of the undisputed faces of the entire league, a legitimate MVP candidate, and a player whose health directly and profoundly impacts the WNBA's postseason credibility. So to see her limping off the court while the officials simply shrugged off the play that caused the injury ignited an immediate and ferocious wave of public outrage. And this was never just about a single isolated injury, it was about the much bigger, much more troubling picture.
The NBA referee's official account, they tweeted this. They said this is not a foul. Thomas legally gets to the ball and knocks the ball loose prior to any contact. The leg-to-leg contact is incidental once the ball is clearly loose. This was correctly judged in real time as a no call, as were the subsequent technical fouls. I'm floored by this.
If a top-tier MVP caliber player like Naphessa Collier is not going to be protected by the officials, especially in the high-stakes environment of the postseason, then what does that truly say about the league's priorities? That is precisely why this single play became so much more than just another highlight or a simple missed call. It became an explosive, league-altering flashpoint. And while the fans were busy furiously arguing online, the real destructive fallout was only just beginning. Because if the referee's initial decision on the court was what set tempers ablaze, what came next turned that simmering fire into a full-blown inferno.
What steps is the league taking to ensure the fair and consistent calls are being made throughout these high-stake playoff games?
Yeah, I think, Christina, I smiled when you started that question because I don't think it's just this year. I think every year everybody complains about officiating, by the way, in every sport. So, but that means people care. They care so much. And we hear the concerns from the ecosystem in our league, whether it's fans, players, coaches. We take it seriously. We understand there's frustration. Our game is constantly evolving. We just talked about the speed, talent, and physicality, and we recognize that.
Chaos has erupted across the WNBA after Naphessa Collier's frightening injury collided with a storm of controversy that has now landed squarely on Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. What began as a heated debate over a late-game play quickly turned into a league-wide crisis as media and fans pointed fingers not just at referees, but at Engelbert for allowing an environment where dangerous physicality goes unchecked. Her reaction only poured gasoline on the fire, with reports describing her defensiveness as a full-blown tantrum. For players and coaches, this wasn't about one foul. It was about a pattern of inaction and dismissive leadership building all season. The question hanging over the league is simple. Can Engelbert restore credibility, or has the damage already gone too far? Everything began in the Minnesota Lynx versus Phoenix Mercury matchup. With the game hanging in the balance, Naphessa Collier was driving hard down the court. Then came Alyssa Thomas, sliding across her path to rip the ball loose. At first glance, it looked like a perfectly executed defensive play, a clean strip and an easy layup. The Mercury celebrated, and to the referees, it was business as usual. But for Collier and the Lynx, this was the beginning of a nightmare. Yes, Thomas got her hand on the ball first, but the angle of her body created a collision course. Collier was sprinting full speed in one direction. Thomas barreled across her lane from the side. Her leg tangled against Thomas's frame, and in an instant, her stride was broken. She crumpled to the floor, clutching her ankle. The crowd fell silent, What looked incidental at full speed now appeared in slow motion as a career-altering sequence. The officials didn't flinch. They deemed the play legal, labeling the aftermath incidental contact. According to their explanation, Thomas made a legitimate play on the ball, and whatever happened afterward was just the chaos of basketball. That ruling left fans stunned. For anyone watching Collier's fall, it didn't look like an accident. It looked like negligence. Incidental contact is supposed to apply when a defender makes a normal move without intending to collide. But what happens when the collision is unavoidable? Could Thomas have pulled off that steal without cutting across Collier's stride? That question split the basketball world. Some argued it was brilliant defense, others saw it as reckless and a glaring example of the WNBA's officiating inconsistencies. For Collier, the timing couldn't have been worse. She's not just a star, she's an MVP candidate whose health directly impacts postseason credibility. Seeing her limp off the court while officials shrugged ignited a wave of outrage. If a top player like Collier isn't protected, what does that say about league priorities? The play became a flashpoint, and if the referee's decision set tempers ablaze, what came next turned the fire into an inferno. The controversy came down to one critical question: was Alyssa Thomas's steal truly unavoidable, or did her angle of attack guarantee that Naphessa Collier would be taken out? That difference separates a hustle play from a moment that changes a season. Referees are taught to judge whether a player could have made a play without endangering their opponent. On this play, Thomas reached cleanly, but her body's momentum cut directly across Collier's stride. The fall wasn't just incidental, it was built into the trajectory. This is where the spirit of the rule comes into play. If the defender is in a position where they cannot make a play without a crash, it ceases to be incidental. Fans pointed this out endlessly, comparing it to a block where a defender swats the ball but lands with a knee in the shooter's chest. The ball may be touched legally, but the aftermath is still illegal. What infuriated many was how quickly the league dismissed those concerns. In slow motion, you could see Collier's body bend unnaturally. Analysts replayed the clip frame by frame, showing how her ankle twisted. For a player of Collier's caliber, this wasn't a small oversight. Then came the perception problem. Fans on social media asked, would the league still call it incidental if it were LeBron James or Steph Curry sprawled out on the hardwood? The overwhelming belief was no, and that comparison only deepened the sense of unfairness. The point wasn't just about Thomas or Collier, it was about the standard the league wanted to uphold. Once the NBA referee's official account weighed in, the conversation exploded. If the play itself had divided fans, the firestorm reached a new level when the NBA referee's official account defended the call. In a rare move, the account declared Thomas's steal was clean, and any contact afterward was incidental. To the wider basketball community, that statement landed like a grenade. By confidently declaring the no call correct, the league's own officiating body essentially told people their eyes were lying. It felt dismissive, as if referees were hiding behind technicalities instead of addressing player safety. The statement hardened positions, pushed players to speak out, and gave fans the sense that the system was rigged to protect officials. The timing only made things worse. This was the postseason, with championship implications. One of the league's brightest stars had just gone down, and instead of empathy, the response was to validate the very call that caused the outrage. For many, it symbolized everything wrong with WNBA officiating this season: inconsistency, defensiveness, and a lack of accountability. And one coach wasn't about to let it pass quietly. When the referees doubled down, Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve reached her breaking point. This wasn't a measured complaint, it was an eruption that became one of the most talked about moments of the season. As Thomas scored, Reeve turned her fury directly toward the officials, storming up the sideline. She was relentless, chasing down referees and pointing furiously. Players and assistants scrambled to intervene. Natisha Heidemann tried to hold her back. One moment stood out. Dorka Juhas grabbed a towel to shield Reeve's mouth from cameras, worried her curses would draw harsher punishment. The image of a coach being physically restrained by her own team symbolized the boiling frustration that had been building all season. Reeve's meltdown wasn't just about Collier's injury, it was the culmination of months of tension over officiating. The referees ejected her, but even as security guided her out, Reeve didn't back down. She exchanged heated words with fans on her way out, her voice breaking through the chaos. For many viewers, this was shocking. For For others, it was cathartic, as if Reeve was voicing the collective outrage of the league. What made this resonate even more was that Reeve is a multiple-time champion and one of the most respected figures in the league. When someone with her stature loses control, it forces people to take notice. The real storm came later, when she took her frustrations to the post-game press conference. If Reeve's sideline eruption was the spark, her press conference was the explosion. Most expected her to cool off. Instead, she doubled down, shifting the conversation from one foul to a full-scale indictment of WNBA leadership. She began by warning about the dangers of unchecked physicality, noting that injuries become inevitable when referees allow defenders to bulldoze through players. She cited examples from other teams, including Becky Hammon, voicing the same frustrations. This wasn't a Lynx issue, it was a league-wide problem. Then came the line that set social media ablaze. "I want to call for a change of leadership at the league level when it comes to officiating. It's malpractice to have these referees working semi-final playoff games." The word malpractice wasn't accidental. It suggested not just incompetence, but negligence. To Reeve, the decision-makers who assigned those referees were endangering players and undermining the postseason. Clips of her rant went viral. Some praised her courage, others criticized her for attacking the institution that employs her. Reeve pointed out that Collier, an MVP candidate, hadn't taken a single free throw that night despite being constantly attacked. To her, this was evidence of a systemic problem. By pointing the finger at Cathy Engelbert's administration, Reeve escalated the issue from a referee problem to a leadership crisis. Cheryl Reeve's outburst wasn't the first warning. Earlier in the season, Becky Hammon had already issued a stark one about unchecked physicality. Having coached in both the NBA and WNBA, she said that if NBA referees allowed the same level of leeway, there would be fights every night. The WNBA has a reputation as a gritty physical league, but when physical crosses into reckless, the line becomes blurry. Players adapt to what referees allow. If body checks and stride cuts stay silent, defenders will keep using them. Critics argue that's what happened in the Thomas Collier play. Thomas took advantage of a climate where aggressive defense is rarely punished, and Collier paid the price. This season has already seen stars sidelined due to contact-heavy plays. Every time a top player goes down, the league's credibility takes a hit. The WNBA is in a growth surge, drawing new fans thanks to its star power. But injuries to players like Collier threaten that momentum. New fans don't want to see all-stars limping off the floor because of preventable collisions. Hammond's perspective highlights a cultural difference. In the NBA, officiating tightened to protect stars. The WNBA seems stuck in an old mindset where toughness is celebrated even when it undermines the quality of play. Reeve's meltdown, Hammond's warning, and Collier's injury all point to one conclusion: the WNBA's officiating culture is out of step with its ambitions. The bigger danger isn't just losing players, it's losing trust. When the dust settled, all eyes turned to WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. This was her moment to show leadership. Instead, her response left many feeling underwhelmed. In interviews, she repeated the refrain, "Every sport complains about officiating." In this context, it felt dismissive. Fans weren't just venting about a missed call, they were watching an MVP candidate carried off the floor. Comparing that to generic gripes seemed tone-deaf. Her defense of the league's officiating system also rang hollow. Engelbert pointed out the extensive training referees undergo, but that raised an uncomfortable question. If the system is so thorough, why are playoff games still marred by controversy? Fans wanted urgency. They wanted Engelbert to say, "This isn't acceptable, we're fixing it." Instead, her tone suggested patience. In a league fighting to keep new fans, patience doesn't sell. It also didn't help that Engelbert has a track record of being cautious when boldness is needed. With Reeve publicly calling for leadership change, Engelbert again seemed hesitant to enforce authority. The current narrative paints Engelbert as soft, more concerned with image than with addressing the issues tearing the league apart. That's a dangerous reputation for any commissioner. Now the stakes are higher than ever. Engelbert must decide whether to punish one of her most decorated coaches, address officiating concerns, and restore confidence. Her next move could determine the direction of the league itself. This wasn't just about one play. Naphessa Collier's injury became a symbol of a league at a crossroads. The first concern is precedent. If a play like Thomas's collision is excused as incidental contact, what does that signal to players in the finals? It tells defenders to push boundaries without consequence, and tells stars their health isn't fully protected. The second concern is perception. The WNBA has worked tirelessly to grow its audience, but highlight reels should be filled with game winners, not viral clips of coaches cursing at refs. If new fans see chaos instead of excellence, they may not stick around. Then there's the finals themselves. If they are overshadowed by officiating controversies or more injuries, the narrative shifts from triumph to turmoil. That's the nightmare scenario for league leadership. For years, the WNBA has prided itself on toughness, but those values must be balanced with safety. The NBA learned this years ago. If the WNBA fails to adapt, it risks being defined not by its rising stars, but by the controversies that cut them down. This is why the Collier incident, Reeves' eruption, and Engelbert's response feel so monumental. They are threads in a story about what kind of league the WNBA wants to be. One thing is certain, the finals won't just determine a champion, they'll determine whether the WNBA can weather this storm, or if the cracks widen into a full-blown crisis.